Welcome to
Roses and Thorns.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Kelly.
And we're going to talk about The Bachelor.
After the final rose for Matt James.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah. Do you have any news? Just kidding.
All of our news is in the week 10 episode, please and thank you.
Yeah.
So we have host Mr. Very Tight Suit.
Very tight suit. Oh my goodness. Too tight.
Like, I wonder, I think you brought this up because I made a joke and then you brought up a good point that like maybe he was like working out extra since he was going to be on the show, like wanted to make sure he looked his best.
Yeah.
And they like didn't measure for extra muscles.
That, and you made a really good point too, that he's wearing a sweater and maybe they weren't accounting for a sweater and maybe they're just accounting for a shirt.
Yes.
A dress shirt.
Yes. So there's a lot of extra potential for bulk.
Yeah.
So there's Emmanuel Acho, ex-NFL player and writer and host of Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. I just found out it's actually a book. I just thought it was
a book. He just came out with another book. I think you saw
Yeah.
an uncomfortable conversation with a black boy.
Boy, yes.
Which is, and that one I think is especially interesting, possibly. And I think, I don't know, I've been listening to podcasts with people that have been writing books for their past self. So like, what would you want in a book for that you wish you had?
Okay, that's an interesting concept.
So like Emmanuel Acho, he wrote the Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Boy as a book that he wanted to have when he was a child growing up as a black boy. There was also a book with, I think it was a book with a woman that is a black sci-fi writer.
Oh, cool.
And it's very rare that that's a thing because it's mostly white male dominated. And she wanted basically to kind of write out her situation and her experience as a black up and coming black sci-fi writer. And it's not a trail that you get to like she basically blazed it. I mean, yeah, blazed the trail. I mean, along with another person that was her inspiration, which was also a black woman and also queer. It's just like there's so many things that like you just don't know what you're gonna run into.
Oh, that's so cool. We saw Emmanuel Acho on Stephen Colbert, and he mentioned that this is unrelated to being a writer, just Emmanuel Acho. He mentioned that the Bachelor producers have approached him on 3 different occasions to try to get him to be a contestant on the show. And each time he said no.
And I wonder what it is. Like, I don't know what else he's been in that has, him being a possible person.
There are enough ex-NFL players on the show that I feel like there is somebody related to the show whose job it is to just look at the lineup of NFL players and who like doesn't make the team and be like, well, what else are you doing? You want to come on the show?
And also ex-pageant contestants. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Michelle.
So she's doing okay. And I think the thing that stuck out to me the most was that she didn't get the closure that she wanted. She mentioned that she wanted just 2 minutes with him to just have her peace. She talked to the producers about it, and they're like, Matt says no. And I think she had just watched the finale right before, because it seemed like that was the case. Yeah. So she had to have seen how broken up he was about it and what he was going through, and she didn't get to see that
at the time.
So she didn't know what he was going through at the time, and And I guess if you do, I mean, you still want to say your piece, but you can see maybe why he said no.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah. I mean, she seems like a very reasonable person that maybe watching it back, it was different for her, but like still when asked about how she felt in that moment, it was probably all about closure. And yeah, she talks about like how she wasn't okay. Like it was really, really difficult for her. And she wasn't looking to change Matt's mind. She didn't want to get in the way of anything with Rachel. She like just wanted to be able to talk to Matt so that she could like say her piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Emmanuel asks her about how she felt about the stuff with Rachel. And she says she felt hurt when she learned that information. She does think that Rachel has a good heart, but she has a lot more learning to do.
Yeah. There is a section that Emmanuel Acho at backstage talked to Matt and had the clarity to see that Matt's probably not going to reconcile with Rachel at all. But maybe we can have Rachel and Michelle come to some agreement or, you know, kind of make things up a little bit. And that is something that they did. Michelle, I think we saw her sharing her opinion of what happened with Rachel. And then Rachel and Michelle basically poured their hearts out for each other or to each other. And then they hugged it out, you know? Aww, so it was like something that was really nice to see happen, but they left it out. And it was something that Emmanuel Acho kind of decided to like, hey, let's do this really quick. So maybe it wasn't, maybe they ultimately knew that they didn't have time for it. But it seemed like a pretty good thing to show too. Because I think whether or not they actually hung out together, they're going through the same thing. And they should be able to bond through that at least.
Yeah. And I mean, that's Emmanuel's whole thing is like to try to bring people together to like, okay, let's talk about our differences and then like figure out where our common ground is. Yeah. Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
She also talks about the Chris Harrison interview very, very briefly, but that basically like that with like what seemed like lack of consequences for a while, compounded with the hurt she was feeling from the Rachel situation, just like it was just like adding to it.
Yeah.
Matt and Michelle?
Yeah.
So Michelle tells him that she wasn't okay when he left, and she's like just crying and surrounded by producers, and like that was like really hard for her. And she just wanted to talk to him to get closure.
Yeah. And she says that she has a place in her heart for him. And honestly, like after she was done saying her talking for just 2 minutes, she was like, yeah, I'm done. Like that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
And she, you know, she has no hard feelings. They hug it out at the end or...
Well, and Matt says that like if he had known what she was going through, like how hurt she was, he would have given her the time to talk. He wasn't, I think this is me speaking now, that he wasn't thinking about her because he was in such a bad place, that he was probably more in like a self-preservation mode than anything.
Possibly. And maybe the producers didn't quite express what she was going through at that moment because she asked the producers to ask Matt, and then who knows what got translated to Matt. And I don't know if it was anything she could have done after the experience, like after they got their cell phones back, that maybe she could have reached out to him.
But if she was already hurt that he didn't want to talk to her, then
yeah, I guess
she might not have wanted to bother him.
But yeah, it does seem like she was good. She was good now. And, you know, she, after saying her piece and him expressing, you know, regret to not talking to her then, that like she's good.
Yeah. She's not in love with him anymore. But as you said, he holds a special place in her heart now. All right. Just Matt?
Just Matt. Emmanuel asks him about what's it like to be the first Bachelor, and
Black Bachelor.
Yes, Black Bachelor, the first Bachelor ever. And he shares that there's a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure to be perfect. That, you know, he mentions that he's going to be the first Black person in somebody's house, probably. And they were talking about how they have to basically represent the Black culture whenever they talk to anybody, because it's most likely they are going to be the only Black person that they interact with in
that day, at least.
That day, that week, that month, like, who knows? And so it's obviously things that we don't think about. I mean, I think about it sometimes, especially when I'm in Ohio. That, you know, I don't think there's not as much of pressure for me to be perfect, but there is a thing I think about. I'm like, there's probably not an Asian person within my radius of like 5 miles, 10 miles. Yeah. Yeah.
And yet how much weight and pressure you would feel as a person to, like, you are representing an entire race of people, right? Like, he is, for so many, everything he does gets stored in some people's minds as like, that's what Black people do.
It's not even quite like race is, I mean, you can, depends how you think about it. Like, you might think like Chinese, Vietnamese, Japanese, but then at least how I've been thinking about it, and it's a poor way of thinking about it, but knowing that I think about it this way is probably how other more ignorant people think about it, that Black people is just like the entire continent of Africa. Not that there's like Nigerians or South Africans or, you know, other Black countries, that like he's representing an entire continent and Black people all over the world.
Jesus.
And maybe if you see a Chinese person, you're like, oh, they're representing Chinese people. And there might be more ignorant people that thinking that like, oh, there's an Asian person, they represent all of Asia. They don't care what ethnicity you are. And so given that pressure that he's representing that to some people, it's, ugh.
Yeah, that's not fair to begin with.
Oh, absolutely not.
Yeah. Wow. And I think at some point he says something about like, I might be like, I don't know, maybe this was just something else that was going in my head. Did he say something about being like how, I can't articulate it. Never mind. I can't. Okay. But and this really just turns into a whole conversation about like being a Black man in America and like what that means and like the weight that carries, how like you can't just react how you want to react naturally. Like it has to almost be like calculated because everyone's watching you. Just, man, like, and the thing is like growing up as a white person in this country that I don't have to worry about representing all white people. Nobody expects me, like they see me and they're like, well, that's how white women act. Like when I go to other countries, they might say, oh, that's how Americans act, right? Or to my students who are from other countries, that they sometimes are surprised like how friendly Americans are. And I think part of that is from me, but they also just generally see a lot of friendly Americans. I think some of them, because I'm the American that they interact with the most, that what I say and do might get stored in their minds. It's like, this is how Americans are. And I think generally I'm okay with representing that to them.
Sure.
But for like, it's nothing I think about, right? It's not something I'm aware of. Until this moment, I've never thought about the fact that I might represent Americans quite generally to a lot of my students, but also they are interacting with Americans all around them.
Yeah, wherever they go.
So it is a different situation. But yeah, it's not something I have to worry about or think about. I'm rarely, maybe I've never been the only white person in a room. Maybe teaching, actually. Yeah, I probably have been the only white person in a room while teaching.
Sure. But there's usually like a white person within earshot of you.
I mean, if I yell,
yeah,
sure, if I yell,
like between like rooms and stuff, like I don't know, if you took away all the walls, someone could hear you.
But there's also a difference in like I'm the authority in that classroom.
Yeah, power dynamics.
Yeah, there's absolutely a power dynamic. But otherwise, like I'm not the only white person in the room. I don't have to represent white people, and it sucks to know that that's an experience that so many people in this country have to go through, and the entire rest of the country is just not even like there's like completely oblivious to that. Yeah.
Emmanuel finally asks him about the pictures and the news and stuff that came out about Rachel. He said at first he thought they were rumors. We very quickly saw pictures and evidence of this stuff. So maybe he was feigning ignorance of it.
Or like wanting to be ignorant. So maybe he didn't like dig into it.
And then, of course, eventually he finds out and sees it for himself and obviously disappointed and makes him question everything.
He says that it brought up feelings of growing up in the South as a black man.
The old South.
Oof. I mean,
reminds him of the old South.
He grew up in the South.
Right.
And so it reminded him of growing up in the South as a black man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he eventually asks Matt if they are still together. And then he shares that after she put out her statement, he took a step back and he realized that she doesn't understand what it's like to be black in America. And that meant that he is no longer together with Rachel. Yeah.
And honestly, I think a person could spend every single day educating themselves about what it means to be a black person in this country. And I think that if you're not a black person in this country, there's just no way you could ever fully understand it.
You'll never know. There's so many microaggressions. That's the thing about microaggressions. It's that it's so small that you won't even really notice it, even if you see it, even if it's right in front of your face. And Emmanuel asks, like, why can't you bring her through this process of learning and everything? You guys can work through it together. And I think, understandably, Matthew. it's serious, guys. He thinks he can't do it.
Yeah. I understand that him not wanting that to be on him.
Yeah, it's so much pressure. It not only is it teaching your future wife, possibly your partner, what it's like to be black, and then but also in this spotlight, and a spotlight of media, social media, and tabloids and stuff like that. Like that is. It sounds like something I would never want to do.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people are probably wondering, like, why is Matt James not helping her with this? He probably helped her with the statement, but it's understandable to not want to hold her hand through this process.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like we've heard, and maybe you haven't, that you don't want to put the burden of educating people on race, on like,
well, on the person who is harmed by it. Like, you don't want to put the burden of education on the person who's harmed by it. Right? If they're willing to do it, that's great. But it's not their responsibility to teach us.
Right. There was, I'm just horrible with names, but there is a guest on the Higher Learning podcast, and she is very outspoken about racial equality and inequality. And she says, I'm sick of giving free lessons to white people. Like, don't put in, like, if you're paying me, sure, I'll teach you how to do it, but I'm not going to do this for free anymore. Like, she puts things out on Facebook and I was going to say MySpace, Instagram and Twitter, and just she's sick of it.
Yeah,
she's done.
Yeah,
and it's understandable because it's been a constant since last summer. I mean, all her life, but like it's I think especially been more of a thing in educating people.
And I think
this past year,
if you're not seeing change come out of that, that would be even harder.
Yeah.
So I want to first say, like, I fully support what Matt James decided here. I don't fault him in any way. This is his decision to make for how he wants to lead his life and how much investment he wants to give emotionally into something like this. And I understand where he's coming from as best as I could. He says something along the lines, I don't know at what point, but something about how, like, if she doesn't understand, like, his blackness, then she's not going to understand, like, her children's blackness. And so it's like how that would affect their relationship and her relationship with her kids. And like, just like how her ignorance would be an issue. And that's totally fair. And this maybe is possibly part of what happened with Abigail. I have no idea. But if he had gone into a relationship with Abigail, he would never know what it was like fully to be a deaf person in this country, right? In the world, right? Like, I don't think there's any country that is good at treating disabled people.
Yeah.
Like that treats disabled people correctly, or people with disabilities. And she said, like, her children would very likely be deaf. And so he would never fully understand the experience his children were going to have in that case, especially being biracial deaf kids. Also, biracial kids have a different experience than Black people. So that is one that he could understand, because he is biracial. But like, if he dated a Black person and they have a Black kid, right, there's like a different experience between a biracial experience and a Black experience. I think it can be harder for biracial kids, I think, from what I've heard, because you can be not accepted by either community, and that can be tough, and like finding your identity there. But like, I will never understand what it's like to be an Asian person in this country, or a Chinese person's country, or a child of immigrants. Like, I will never fully understand what that's like. You will never fully understand what it's like to be a woman, right? And so we can't ever fully understand the problems that other people are facing and how that might affect our children. Like, we don't know what it's going to be like to grow up as a biracial Asian child in this country. Like, we have no idea. And so on some level, it doesn't seem fair to like have that as your standard. But at the same time, the burden's not on him to help her understand that. So, and it's a decision that if he needs someone who's going to understand that, then I don't think he can date outside of his race then. And I think that's an okay thing to learn, right? I think that's an okay thing to learn, that you're like, I actually need someone who's going to understand my experience. Which Rachel Lindsay said that, like, she didn't think she could date someone who wasn't Black for a long time, because that's something she thought she needed, was somebody who would fully understand the Black experience.
Yeah, it might be, I mean, the relationship is so public and the controversy is so big that, I mean, I'm sure he's gotten a lot of DMs, very negative ones, and the pressure of the relationship, and even if it's, maybe she is very progressive, she just made these really poor choices in the past, that it was just still not the jumping off point of where he needs to be with somebody in terms of like racial sensitivity. Yeah. Because I'm sure Brian Rachel Lindsay's Brian probably had no idea what it's going to be like being a Black person, or what it's like to be a Black person, or what maybe not even what it's like to be dating a Black person. But maybe he was just at a point where, or a place in his education of race, where it was easier for him, or easier for them.
Yeah. And I mean, I think everyone has different expectations for their partner.
That too. Yeah.
Okay, Rachel. I don't like to comment on people's weight, so I'm going to do this very cautiously, but I thought she looked incredibly thin. Like, this has been a really difficult time, and I wonder if it's like affect her emotional health so much that it's like affecting her physical health.
I did notice that she was thinner. It did look that, it did look like she was also pretty thin at the final rose ceremony, like thinner than she was before. But then, it did look like she was even thinner than that too. Yeah,
like I feel like I could really see like in her arms that it just seemed like there wasn't much there, and then like her hip bones were sticking out, and I didn't see that. It made me like kind of worried about her mental health. Yeah.
Okay. Emmanuel Acho asks, who do you blame for this whole racial insensitivity?
Yeah. Do you blame your upbringing or society or
social media, blah, blah, blah? And she says she doesn't blame anyone specifically. I think she didn't want to name anything specifically, but she said it was like probably a combination of everything. He asked why it took you so long to apologize. She says she wanted to stop and totally understand how she hurt everybody that she hurt, which makes sense, but it took her a very long time to come out with a statement.
It did, but I will say it was only a few days before her statement that I fully understood as well. So, I mean, I wonder, because for me, it was the Chris Harrison interview with Rachel, and with Rachel Lindsay, and when Rachel Lindsay was like, if I were there, who would I represent? Like, that's when it hit me. And then seeing everybody's responses to that interview helped me understand more as well. And so then Rachel came out, and I wonder if there was something similar for her.
Maybe. And
because people weren't talking about why it was wrong. They were just talking that it was wrong. And so that made it difficult if you didn't already understand the impact. And it wasn't on Matt to educate her on this.
And maybe Matt was trying to educate her on this, and they were probably crafting the statement together and going through the whole thing. Yeah.
So, when she comes out, he asks her, how have you been? And she basically is like, I don't want to make this about me. And then she doesn't defend herself at any point. She takes full accountability. She doesn't blame anyone else for it. She says it doesn't make it right just because everyone else around you is doing it. And Emmanuel says a really cool thing. This is roughly an exact quote, which I understand that those words don't go together, but it's like almost an exact quote. History is meant to be remembered, but not all history should be celebrated.
Yeah.
Like, yes, like that's what it is. Like when people are like wanting to have statues for
the Confederacy,
it's like, no, we can remember it. We don't need to celebrate it.
Yeah, we're not going to forget Christopher Columbus. So let's do the right thing and rename Columbus Flavortown.
Flavortown, Ohio. Yes, I am on board, particularly because I don't live there anymore.
Where do you live?
Flavortown. In case y'all haven't heard about that, they're wanting to, I don't know how many people are wanting to, but there is a petition of some sort to rename Columbus, Ohio into Flavortown, Ohio, because that's where Guy Fieri's from. And I think it's really funny. And I lived in Columbus for 5 years, and I definitely would not want that if I were still living there. I mean, but it'd be really funny to
If you need any more, if you need any like convincing of why that's a good idea, Guy Fieri has, I think, raised at least like $2 million for local and small businesses. I mean, local restaurants specifically. Mm-hmm. So he's done more for local restaurants than the whole entire government.
Yeah, honestly,
like, at least Ohio.
Everything I've heard about Guy Fieri is amazing. That he's just like an incredible human being, that he's kind, that he's patient. I think he lost his sister to suicide and she was gay. And so he's like raised so much money, been like a huge advocate for gay rights and for gay individuals and for gay mental health. And it's like, wow, like what? Like everything I've heard about him is he's just an incredible human being. Mm-hmm. So really, we should probably just name it Fieri, Ohio, which would be way cooler.
Guy, Ohio.
Guy, Ohio. Guy, Ohio. And Emmanuel asks her what she's been doing to change. And she's like, I don't think it's really that important, like what I've been reading or doing. I think what matters is what I actually do with the information that I get. And sure. So she hasn't had much time to do anything with that information. Mm-hmm. So that's valid.
I was like, what podcast? Like, so what I really liked, what I thought was a good step that she made recently, I think in her stories possibly, is that she actually shared resources of the things that she was doing. And she said that she's been listening to podcasts, reading books. I'm like, say them so that, like, you know, people that you have this huge platform right now on TV, and maybe you're not allowed to do it. But you should have called these podcasts out as really good resources for people that don't understand why it was such an issue. Yeah. Because then they might actually listen to it and they're like, oh, you've convinced me that I've been doing racist things unknowingly, or read this book, and like people are less likely to read a book, but you know, at least that's out there.
Yeah,
that she's sharing that stuff, and I thought it made, I wanted, like, tell me those things that you've been doing. I wanted receipts. Other people wanted receipts on Twitter too. They're like, what did you do though? You know?
Okay, but here's the thing. She could have given a list of 50 different things that she had read, and people would be like, great, but what are you doing about it? Right? Like, she was never going to make people happy. There's absolutely nothing she can say in this entire interview that's going to appease anyone.
Yeah, I wasn't appeased.
Yeah, so there was nothing she could do. Yeah. So I don't disagree with the way she handled this. I think it's great that she later shared her resources, because I know when everything happened with Hannah Brown.
Later, it was like weeks ago.
Oh, okay. Well, I think it's great that she shared those resources. That's wonderful, because I know when Hannah Brown had her whole thing, like, I took notes of some of the resources that she shared because I'm interested in growing, and so I had, like, you know, I had my notes about it, and yeah. So I mean, I think that that's awesome that she did that, but I think there's nothing she could have said here that was going to make people happy. So it doesn't actually matter what she said at that time.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have been happy if she just named the resources. And also the statement about, like, you know, it doesn't matter what I do with that information, it's what I do with it. Or it doesn't matter what I read, it's what I do with it afterwards. And, like, you know, obviously, yeah, again, it's not long enough for her to do anything.
Yeah, and maybe they didn't want her to say any specific resources either.
Yeah.
We don't know. So.
Yeah.
She discusses the breakup, and she says that she was really surprised and caught off guard by it. But when she reflected, she realized that with how good their relationship was and how much he, like, seemed to really love her, that he must have really been hurting if he wanted to break up with her for this.
Right. She mentions that they broke up through the phone, which was unfortunate.
Because, I mean, they can't see each other really, and it's a pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, however easy it was to kind of sneak around before, it's, you know,
way harder now.
Yeah.
Because there's like 12 people at the airport. That's probably not true. I'm sure there's a lot more people at the airport. But, and she still loves him. And it's very, very clear that she still loves him.
Yeah.
Matt and Rachel?
Yeah. So she apologizes again. Again, she is pouring her heart out, and he is giving her nothing.
Yeah. But this is different.
Yeah, this is different. And he is stone-faced pretty much the entire time. Like, it seems like he is still very much hurting from the breakup. Just by the way that he's reacting to everything.
There was a lot in this silence. There was so much silence, and there was a lot in it. We were watching on TV, but like I could feel it, and I was like barely watching it because I was trying not to look at the screen, but like I could feel like the tension between them.
I think Emmanuel did a really good job, kind of like gently pushing him to say something,
like giving him space to like have those like process feelings, and then encouraging them to come out, and then giving them time, and then encouraging them to come out. Like, we are still on TV, man.
Yeah, exactly. So Emmanuel doing a really great job, hosting this. He would often ask really good questions. Give not even talking to the person that he's interviewing, but just talking to the camera about facts about like, or you know, the history thing. That like, he's a really good host. And so there was a lot of silence, and it almost seemed like when he finally did speak, I think he was a little flustered, not flustered, but maybe like he was being very careful with his words. And he didn't say much, other than him being very disappointed in her.
Well, he was disappointed that he had to explain the problem to her. Which that's reasonable. And then I think this is where he said that like it showed that she didn't understand his blackness, and she wouldn't understand their future kid's blackness, or his future kid's blackness.
He says over and over that he thinks that this process is something that she needs to do on her own. And I don't totally agree with that. I think he could be a really great person to help her through it, but he doesn't want to. And that is absolutely okay. Because it doesn't have to be, it shouldn't be on the burden of just your fiance or your partner to like bring you through that process.
I think I understood Emmanuel correctly. I did not go back and watch it. But if I understood him correctly, he was really trying to help out Rachel. Because what I understood was that he asked her, how would you explain to him that the woman sitting in front of him now is not the woman from 2018? Did he ask her that?
Yes.
Okay.
He did.
Okay. And I'm like, oh, he's really trying to help Rachel here. But I think that's his whole thing, is he wants to like bridge gaps and help misunderstandings. And like, I think this is a thing that he wants to give Rachel the opportunity to explain that she has changed and she has grown.
And I think it's a very good argument to say, like, I'm not the same person that I was in 2018. And I'm not. I've learned a lot since 2018. And I think I'm sure she is much better in those respects, but I think obviously to Matt James, it just seemed like it was still not enough.
I mean, she says basically her response is that like she went on the show for him. Like she found out who he was, and she wanted to be there for him. And through the process, like she fell in love with him, that she loves him, all of him.
She still thinks that he is her person. She thanks God again to like bringing him into her life. I wonder if it's like, well, last time I mentioned God on this show, his mom really liked it. Maybe he'll like it when I say it again.
It could have been calculated. If God really is a big part of her life, though, then that's probably just like
what she wants to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Emmanuel asks Matt if the door is even still slightly open. Mm-hmm. And Matt just keeps saying the same thing that he's been saying of like, she needs to work on herself and I can't help her with that. And just it's roundabout way of just saying like,
probably
no.
not. Like,
yeah. I mean, nobody can say anything definitely, but it sounds like he's just too hurt to even like think about being with her.
Yeah. And I wonder if like, it didn't seem like, obviously there's a lot of emotions and a lot of stuff going on in his head for as the reasons to break up with Rachel. And it seemed like he just didn't have much to say, or at least didn't have a lot to say. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was as simple as he didn't want to be there, or he didn't want to be with her anymore. Like that was it. Like like obviously there's all this other stuff, and it's like he just didn't want to anymore. And whether or not he has good and I don't, it doesn't besides the obvious reasons like that have been stated already, he doesn't have like more reason for that, you know. He never said like he's not in love with her anymore.
Yeah,
he just like didn't want to be with her anymore.
And I would argue that maybe it's not doesn't want to, but like maybe he wants to and he just can't. That's kind of how I interpreted his energy here.
Okay.
Rachel still has a ton of learning and growing to do. Like we can act like 2018 was so fucking long ago, but it was 3 years if we're being generous, because we were only 3 months into this new year. So it was basically 2 years ago. So that is not very long ago. And for her to like have not understood the problem initially and like have never even thought about this being a problem, then like that, it just shows like how much learning and growing she still needs to do. And like, obviously I am not a person who could accept any apology that she would ever give, but I do want to say that what I noticed is she took full accountability, took full responsibility. She didn't defend herself. She didn't blame anyone else. She attempted, I felt like anytime she could, to not put the focus on her in this issue, because the issue wasn't really about her. And I feel like she made it about her when it was about her and Matt. But otherwise, it was not about her. And I think that shows a lot of maturity.
Sure.
And I am going to say this cautiously because I don't want to get canceled, but this Rachel that we saw, and like when I was looking at like the finale episode of this Rachel, I like her. Like I liked the way that she described Matt to Matt's brother. I liked that she brought sunflowers. I liked that she was concerned about how Matt was feeling when he canceled the date. Like obviously immediately it was her own feelings, but then when she had like the entire day to think about it, like what she told Matt was like, I was worried about what was going on with you. And like that empathy. And then here, like, I don't think we said it, but like she says like at the end of this interview that what she wants is for Matt to be happy, which I know is an easy thing to say and not mean, but like I feel like at least in that moment it seemed like she meant it.
Yeah, she did seem like she was sincere about it.
Yeah. And
I get your under.
I kind of like her right now.
I get your under your how you're interpreting her, for sure. Yeah. And there's a chance that they're just showing you all the good stuff.
Of course, they could absolutely be manipulating me. So like the Rachel that I'm seeing here is somebody that I like. But it also could all be performative, right? Like I could totally be falling for an act. That's entirely possible.
Yeah.
So I can't go any further into those feelings. Like I'm not going to stan her or anything, but I just, yeah, I don't know. I think,
I can see where you're coming from. So something I've been thinking about, and I'm not sure if other people agree with it, but maybe it's not the best place to talk about it.
Let's find out.
So whenever I think you're very careful about it, I think other people are as well. When someone, let's say Chris Harrison or Rachel, comes out with an apology, and you're saying like, I'm not the one to accept this apology, and obviously, where was it? If we were talking about something where like if whatever they said didn't offend you for those other people, like you should be offended. I don't know, but you should. So when you eventually realize that like what was like really wrong with Rachel's images, and obviously you understood like the cultural appropriation and stuff, but like the antebellum like balls and stuff, you're like, oh, I finally get it. And then you see it and you're like, okay, now, and then you understand what she did wrong. I feel like there is some things that she should be apologizing to you as well, where she is a white person, and in some ways she is representing some white people, you know, and that doesn't make white people, like there is this perpetual kind of stereotype of white people not understanding Black culture and this continuous cultural appropriation, and like how like it just makes white people seem dense. They just don't get it. Whereas like there are white people that are doing the work and like learning, and like you've read more books on racial equality and inequality that I have. You're putting in way more work, and you know more about it, like book wise, than I do. You haven't lived the experience, but you're putting in much more work. And so I think there is some things that she should be apologizing to other white people too, because, you know, I'm not a deaf person, but if someone's making fun of like a deaf person, I'm offended for that person, and it like hurts me that person's being hurt.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
So I feel like, I don't know, it would hurt too. I don't know. Yeah. Okay. We can move on.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then they announced the next Bachelorette.
What? There's two of them.
There's two. There's gonna be two Bachelorettes, 2 seasons.
Yeah, so I thought it was gonna be this whole thing, but instead they just threw 2 bachelorettes at us. They're like, okay, so here's our next bachelorette, and it's like Katie, and we're like, oh, it's Katie, and then like, oh, also we're having Michelle, you know, like some kind of show about it. But they're like, no, here's your bachelorettes.
Yeah. I thought they were gonna, okay, if I were in charge.
Yeah, let's hear it.
If I were in charge, I would have been like, all right, and your next bachelorette, and then you, that's a drum roll, and then you're real glad I told you it was a drum roll, huh?
Yeah, I was pretty sure it was a drum roll. It is better that you had to explain it.
And then you just have both Katie and Michelle walk out of 2 separate sides of the stage. And so then they walk up and they're like, what? You? What? Huh? And then they look really confused and they're like, oh yeah. And then that's how they announce there's 2 bachelorettes.
like a sitcom commercial.
Yes, like a sitcom commercial.
Okay.
So Katie's season will be next. They're going to start filming that soon. They're currently casting for it.
Like next week or maybe this week.
Yeah, if you go to Reality Steve's Twitter, you'll find the men that are
some of them, right?
slated to be on Katie's season. One of them I retweeted because he looks like Ed in a wig.
I saw your tweet and I agree.
Thank you. And yes, so Katie's season will be next, and then the schedule after that's real fuzzy, but it'll be Paradise and then Michelle.
Yeah. So she's wanting to spend more time with her students. She wants to finish up the rest of the year with her students before she does this. Yeah. And I think I mentioned it to you, and maybe not on the podcast, that like she's putting ahead of her love and her fame, because she's going to be famous because of this. She's putting the well-being of her kids ahead of that.
It's stuff. So nice. So it's like they're having a difficult time enough, and he's like, I'm not gonna take their teacher away from them at the end of the school year. I thought that was really sweet,
and it just shows like the kind of person that Michelle is.
Now what we're definitely going to hear from one half of Bachelor Nation once the season starts, and Michelle's wearing bikinis, and Michelle's making out with lots of different guys, and Michelle's in hot tubs, and it's like, you're someone's teacher. Imagine if your second grade teacher was blah blah blah. It's like, your second grade teacher might be a slut. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm not saying Michelle's a slut. I'm just saying, like, they get, like, your second grade teacher has a life outside of school, and that's fine. It doesn't make them any better or worse of a teacher.
Yeah. That's your own damn fault. Yeah. That's your own
I also wasn't using slut derogatory. Like, I just meant, like, slutting around. Like, I don't use that word derogatory, so I didn't even think about it until.
Yeah, I was like, that's a little harsh. I don't know if you meant it in that negative a way.
I just don't, I don't even use that word derogatory. I'm just like, yeah, it's like someone who's like making out a lot and like having lots of sex. Like, they're just being a slut. It's like, because I don't think it should be a bad thing to, if you want to do those things.
I like how you said it. Slutting around.
Slutting around.
It's like a cartoon.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I've ever wanted to be, is a cartoon. So are we going to podcast Katie's season? Let's figure this out right now on air.
I don't know. Because the thing is that Tisha's going to be hosting, and if we wanted the change in the hosting seat, maybe we do we also want to see, is a factor of it the men that are casted?
A factor of it is that I am currently exhausted. And
that's a factor.
I know it's going to be like at least 10 weeks before the next season starts, so I could feel differently then. But like thinking about doing Katie, Paradise, and Michelle, like boom, 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 makes me want to quit this podcast altogether, because I just can't handle that. That's so much.
Okay. So maybe
that's over half the year, just like back to back.
Yeah. So maybe a calculated break from this podcast.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I would be interested to see like what they do on Katie's season, and if they are committing the same torturous acts that they committed to people this season, then I might watch Michelle's season just to support it. But I think after that I would be done, just because you can't keep treating people this way. It's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful. Like, and even like race aside, just like the mind games they play with people is horrible.
Yeah. Like making people come in late. Like there's a chance that they decided to just do that anyways. Like it wasn't, for Claire's season that the men that came in late, they were just planning on doing that anyways.
There's entirely a chance, because why else the fuck were those men ready?
To be, yeah. And then they changed the narrative when I was like, oh, since we have a new bachelorette, let's bring in some new men too. Whereas they were just going to be in anyways.
Yeah, I was actually, yeah, that's a really interesting point because I was thinking the opposite where it's like, oh, they did that they brought in men partway through in the last season and that worked out for Tayshia. So they thought they would try it this season, even though it's a completely different situation. But yeah, maybe they were always planning on doing that to just stir up extra drama.
What you thought too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's plan for now to not podcast Katie's season. Potentially watch it, and maybe tweet about it or something. Yeah. But I think I would enjoy not being absorbed in this world for a little bit.
Yeah. So we do watch it, and it does consume one of our nights in the week. Podcasting consumes another night. So we can definitely use the break from it. Tweeting and posting on Instagram and Twitter is a lot less work.
And really,
I usually just like wake up the morning after and just like think of something to do, and then I post it.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like a great time for us to take a break since we are currently getting more downloads than ever. So
yeah.
They do say quit while you're ahead. So right? That's what they mean. It's like, just as you're getting momentum, just stop. I don't know. So I also worry about Paradise. I really enjoy watching Paradise.
Mm-hmm. Paradise
it's
nuts. A better show.
It's kind of nuts to podcast it though. Because like the storylines are all weird. And it's 2 nights a week.
If you guys see our notes from Paradise, I have to use a laptop and have a table of the relationships. Yeah,
and just organize by relationships. That's really the easiest way to do it.
Yeah, the relationships, and then sometimes if they're having multiple relationships, then we have to add another column because then like that person is in another relationship with somebody else, and it gets complicated.
And Paradise is 2 nights a week.
Yeah, who knows what it's going to be like this time as well.
And we're hoping to get married this summer, and my family's going to be in town. Maybe we should do Katie's season, take Paradise off, and then do Michelle's season.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know. You guys, I guess you'll just be surprised to figure out what happens. We'll see how we feel once Katie's season starts. Let's go there. I don't want to make any commitments right now.
Okay.
Let's see how we feel then.
No, let's keep talking about it.
Oh, for like another half hour, you think?
At least.
Whatever we decide, we'll tweet about it.
Yeah.
If you want to watch out for that. It's a great time to tell them about our handles.
Yeah, it is. So on Twitter, you can follow us and Instagram at Roses and Thorns Pod. You can rate and review and what's the other thing? Rate, review, and subscribe. Yeah.
You're funny.
Okay.
I don't know why I think you're so funny.
I don't know either. I'm glad that is the situation, but
okay.
I think you're also glad that I think that you're funny too.
Yes, it is good. It is very good. All right.
Just lying around.
Stats. Honorary shout out to Australia.
Oh.
Hold on, I'm gonna look real quick.
I think last week they were on there too, right?
They are one of our top downloads, just like overall. Like by countries, even more than the US. Yeah. So shout out to Queensland and New South Wales for carrying all of Australia's back on. I mean, all of Australia on your back. That's the saying.
Carrying all of Australia's outback.
Yes, that's what I meant to say. And Canada, we have Ontario, Alberta, and Unknown. Ontario's sticking with us. Unknown's back there. And we've gotten some of those provinces who have given up on us. But thank you, Ontario, for always being there for us. And then our states are Massachusetts, California, Washington, Connecticut, and Georgia.
Connecticut and Massachusetts are very small towns, small cities.
They're small towns.
And small cities.
I don't know if you know how big Georgia is.
I kind of know.
I'm looking at the map right now. Do you think Georgia is bigger or smaller than Illinois?
Oh, I would say it's bigger.
It's a little bit bigger than Illinois.
Yeah.
So I feel like Georgia, especially looking at the states around it, is quite a large size and landmass.
Sure. I don't know. I don't know about the density of it.
Do you think Georgia is bigger or smaller than... I'm just kidding.
What?
Do it. California.
Texas.
Alaska.
Mm.
For the non-Americans, Georgia is smaller than all of those places. Those are some of the biggest states in the U.S. All right. Well, do you just want to keep talking so we have more to transcribe later, or what do you?
Yeah.
How do you
also, we're
approach
transcribing
this?
our podcast. It takes a lot of time. Yeah, we're gonna have to transcribe that later.
Ryan constantly walks around saying "yo." It is a gender-neutral term, so you got that.
Yeah. Let's stop talking so that we have less work later.
If you know someone who might benefit from a podcast that is transcribed, please let them know about our podcast. We are slow on getting it transcribed because it is just us and we're trying to do our best with it. But our minimal effort is to try to have it done before the next episode. That's what I really try. So this week it didn't come out till Sunday, but that does mean we are spending our weekends doing it. So we're trying.
Yeah.
Please tell people that we're trying. That's what I want on my tombstone. I'm trying.
Please tell people I tried.
All right. Is that it?
Yeah. Bye.
Okay. Love you. Bye.